The best thing about Coleraine is
Bushmills,
Chance Causeway,
the River Band,
Game of Thrones,
whiskey.
Ulster Scots is kind of made up. It's not a language.
James Nesbitt.
Jimmy Nesbitt.
James Nesbitt.
James Nesbitt, yeah.
We never rated Jimmy Nesbitt, but he's done quite well for himself.
Coleraine is County Londonderry.
I would say it's County Derry.
It's in County Londonderry.
No, it's County Derry.
It used to be County Coleraine.
So we're on the border.
Portrush,
Portstewart.
Coleraine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's known as the
Triangle.
It's the Triangle area.
One of the oldest settlements, I think, in all of Ireland.
People in Coleraine would say it is the oldest settlement in Ireland. Yeah.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from sunny Coleraine in County Londonderry or Antrim, that's debatable. And it's an honour at last to do this show in the heart of traditional Republican Catholic Ireland. And so it's only polite to repeat that in Gaelic. Voor you go Mark Steele's in Town, try me the Coleraine. Later we'll sing a medley of songs by the Dubliners and then have a blessing from the Pope. There is a little bit of Protestantism here, if you look for it, and it's given the town this wonderful, distinct look. For example, some Presbyterians say proudly that to be at one with the Lord, you must be sombre and joyless, and this is beautifully reflected in the pedestrianised precinct. That's beautifully empty and silent most days and nights, with not a moment of fun that might upset God. And apparently in the old days there was a market there full of life and bustling people, and Jesus was furious, so thank the Lord that stopped. And there was a harbour, which must have been lovely, and that's not there anymore, but to preserve the beauty of that spot, there is a gorgeous scrap metal yard now, opposite Dunn's stores. At certain points of the day, the mangled washing machines reflect off the river with this wonderful glint. It's just beautiful. And the Protestant religion, of course, in Britain was founded on the idea that Christians should reject expensive, spectacular buildings, and nowhere displays that sense of dour grimness better than County Hall. 7 floors of astounding ugliness, just beautifully Protestant. But there's much more to this town, of course, than religion. The Rough Guide of Ireland said at one point, there's no reason to visit Coleraine. But if you're already there, it is handy for getting to other places. Also, it's a model of how whatever's happened in the past, no one here is bothered about religion anymore. They're just not interested. Instead, whenever you meet anybody new and you're from Coleraine, you ask lovely, sweet questions such as, what's your name? Which school did you go to? Which area were you brought up in? And there's no mention of religion at all. If you can't tell even after that, you might go, what do you think of rosary beads? Or don't curbsides look pretty when they're painted red, white and blue? But never about someone's religion. It's because it's mixed here now. For example, there are Protestant schools and the Catholics are allowed to go to school as well. It's in a completely separate school. It's marvellously integrated. There is a school where Protestant and Catholic kids go together, but I just don't see how that can work. I mean, how can anyone learn about maths if you're sat next to someone with a different view about whether a wispy wafer represents the body of Jesus? And the old divisions are now so much in the past that every year the Orange Order puts on this beautiful music festival with a marching band, specially for the nationalist area on Somerset Road. And they go right into the estate so that the residents don't even have to leave the road to enjoy the lovely flute music. It's inspirational. The Coleraine tourist website is very proud. It says, Coleraine is a big town and ready for city status. Is that true? Are you ready for city status? I mean, I'm much the same. I'm ready for a knighthood. But you are a big town, Coleraine, because you've got a level crossing right in the middle so that the two-carriage train can chug from here to Portrush, just as they have in New York and Berlin. It's a magnificent level crossing because it's over a junction with 3 roads. So if you're not from here, you have no idea where you're supposed to go at what time. And everyone's bibbing you, "Will you run and move a car?" And you think, I'd better go, even though the chances are you're going to end up attached to the end of the train and be dragged to Portrush, where you can enjoy a wonderful day by the sea. There's so much to appreciate here in Coleraine. There's even a website called Places to See in Coleraine on YouTube, where some classical music, this is true, right? Some classical music played, and you see, in order, the statue in the precinct, a church, a country road, a boat by the scrapyard, and Poundland. The thing is, you can come here for a week, but it's not enough to get round it all, is it? Now, the other thing that is wonderfully unusual here in Coleraine is lots of you sort of leave the town that's big and ready to become a city every day to go to the smaller towns like Portrush or Portstewart because they have things to do. Portrush and Portstewart are on the coast and you're a bit inland, so it's known as the triangle between the 3 places. And this is a brilliant idea. Next year you should say that you're part of a hexagon with Portrush, Portstewart, Dublin, Paris and Monte Carlo. Is that right? That's where you all go. If someone says during dinner, "Can you pass the tomato ketchup?" I expect you say, "I'll get it, it's in Portrush." And the other parts of the triangle are on these beautiful stretches of beaches, and there are people who swim there all year round, even when it's freezing, including a group called the Menopausal Mermaids. Are you part of that? This interests me. You would think that with all of you in there, that might warm the sea up a bit. Portstewart does seem very charming, but there's not as much activities in Portrush. TripAdvisor has a list of 10 things to do in Portstewart, and number 9 is Portstewart taxis. You always get there with a sensible fare. It says, that's really bad when the 9th best thing to do in a place is leave with a sensible fare. Or there's Loch Ness, the biggest lake in Britain, where you can sit at the water's edge losing all track of time as you gaze at a magical expanse of toxic algae. You don't get that in the boring lochs in the Republic. Have you all seen the algae? At one point, there was an algae app that you could download to find out where the algae had got to at that moment. And there was an algae helpline that you could ring. Some of you probably only hate it because it's green. Athenian algae will not come into this town. And there'll be a law passed at Stormont that next year the algae has to be orange for balance. The BBC News website said, in 2023 in Loch Ness, multiple factors led to clumps of algae that broke off that travelled along the lower Bann to the north coast. The beaches at Portrush and Portstewart were affected. Even the algae pissed off to Portrush and Portstewart. And there's another issue here to do with the river, which is many people believe that the River Bann is a dividing line in Northern Ireland, and everything east of the River Bann gets all the funding and services. I saw this on Twitter one day when the trains from Coleraine to Derry were cancelled. Is that a lot of days? Someone wrote, the trains have been cancelled past Coleraine because that's what Translink Northern Ireland do. They treat anything west of the Bann as insignificant. Does the east get treated better? So I think it's exactly what this country needs, is another way of dividing people irrationally. This is true. Someone who was quite down on the place, but from here, said to me, Or you might have seen the play about the town on the BBC with the actor James Nesbitt. I thought, oh, this is good. They've perked up a bit. I said, what was that about? And he went, the murders. Do you like Jimmy Nesbitt? He's great. He seems a great actor. Someone told me Jimmy Nesbitt often drinks in the Harbour Bar in Portrush, where they do the best Guinness, because he's got a bit above himself. You la-di-da with your Hollywood. If you were more down to earth, you'd go to the bar where they do the worst Guinness and be sick all night. But oh no, that's not good enough for His Majesty James Nesbitt, is it? Do you all go to the Harbour Bar? Yeah. You know it. I went there last night. It's amazing. There's a little tiny bar as you go in, and then there's about 8 bars altogether, all packed. One of them had a band on, packed. One of them had dance music, and there were these 20-year-olds in there just with dancing. And James Nesbitt really was there in one of the bars. Is he always in there? It's one of the liveliest bars I've ever seen. So you leave Coleraine, right, let's go out. Let's go to Portrush. And then you get there, go wild all night. And then you go, let's go home. I think it's because you reckon that God can't see over the hill. And he won't know what you've been doing. There's excitement in Coleraine because the Coleraine history website asked, what is Coleraine famous for? And says Coleraine is the site of the first recorded human life in Ireland in 5,300 BC. It's now believed that those early people lived in earth shelters either side of the River Bann, with the ones on the west side complaining they didn't get any funding. And then each evening they walked slowly up to Portrush, ate some berries, cooked some fish, thanked the gods by dancing round the fire all night, enjoying themselves, then came back here to sleep. I should say at this point, most English people don't have a clue that Northern Ireland has areas like this with its glorious cliffs and all your dramatic beaches and Portrush with a big wheel in the middle of the high street and a pretty little distillery making its whiskey that's smooth because it's distilled 3 times, not like filthy Scottish whiskey that's only distilled twice, so it's full of tadpoles. They think Northern Ireland is just gritty Belfast full of barbed wire and murals of men in balaclavas and blokes outside shipyards being interviewed going, I was working in Holland and World for 35 years, man and boy, sir, it wasn't like it is now with the Titanic nonsense. We made ships, we didn't have exhibitions about ones that sank, so we didn't. And you talk so much more smoothly because your accent has been distilled 3 times. Right. The area as a whole is one of outstanding beauty with amazing beaches, stunning views across the sea and most famously just up the road, the Giant's Causeway, the astonishing series of cliffs and rock formations, and it's an amazing natural phenomenon of giant basalt columns, and nature has created them in such a way that each one has a Chinese tourist on it posing for a photo. The Giant's Causeway book that you buy at the Visitors Centre says, the Causeway is a wonder of the world, the Irish equivalent of the pyramids. And that makes you the Irish equivalent of Cairo, which you are because you're huge and ready to become a city. You must go up there all the time to see it, don't you? Not bothered? I prefer the level crossing. So there's a story that they came about because there was a giant called Finn who was at war with a Scottish giant, and the Scottish giant was attacking Ireland, and Finn tore up a chunk of land and he threw it at the other giant, and the bit that landed became the Isle of Man, and the hole that he left behind was Lough Neagh. And there's another story as well that he ate some out-of-date fish that gave him the most terrible gastroenteritis. He spewed up 60 tonnes of sick, and that's the toxic algae that you see today. Right, by 1814, this area had dozens of guides who would hang around by the Giant's Causeway, waiting for travellers so that they could charge them for showing them around. William Thackeray wrote, "As they bundled me into their boat, I paid them 10 shillings. A few minutes later, I would happily have paid them 5 more shillings to go and leave me alone." The most astonishing structure of the whole area, even more than the basalt columns, I think, is the visitors' centre. This is a building that charges £15 so that you can go in and have the chance to buy a photo for another £15 of the geological structure that's 5 minutes walk away, that's there all the time, and in the time it takes to buy the photo, you can go and take your own. You don't need a visitor's centre, do you, for a rock formation? When the Vikings came past it, they go, "Oh, that's a shame. Those rocks seem quite interesting, but we can't look at them because there isn't a visitor's centre." There's a free bus that takes you down the hill. Do you know the free bus? If you don't want to walk, the 477. And Mark, who took us down there, said that that's the number of tourists who walk on the road who the bus has knocked over. He said, when it knocks someone down in a minute, it'll go up to 478. Even more controversial, of course, is this very building that we're in, the theatre in Coleraine University, which was built in 1965 when Northern Ireland needed a second university as the one in Belfast wasn't big enough. So, rather than give it to Derry, which is by far the second biggest city in the country, it was given to the town whose major landmark is Poundland. Now, what I was fascinated by, as well as Catholics in Derry, the Protestants in Derry thought the university should be in the town. But the decision was made by a body called the Lockwood Committee, which explained that accommodation would be easier to arrange here because landladies were used to putting up tourists who came to the seaside. Some people suggest another reason was the Lockwood Committee was made up entirely of Protestants who thought Derry was a bit too Catholic. But I doubt it was that. It was more that architecture students could study County Hall, that biology students could study the algae in the loch, and philosophy students could study whether the trains going west actually exist or not. It's brilliant. You should keep this Lockwood Committee going forever. It would award you Brazilian carnivals and Islamic pilgrimages. And if Ireland ever does become united, you could bid to be the capital. There was even a collection of writers and poets here in a group called the Coleraine Cluster that started in the 1970s and would come here to write poems and short stories about Coleraine. They get writer's block usually and have to go to Portrush to get them finished. And there's an exciting annual event here because this is the venue for Northwest 200, one of the world's biggest motorbike races around the roads of the Triangle. And the racers reach speeds of 200 miles an hour before having to brake suddenly to wait 15 minutes at the level crossing. Some of you, with it being Coleraine, I bet some people are stubborn enough to try and cross the road during the race. I'm going down the post office, so I am. I'm not waiting for yous. And there's so many other sports here. Rowing is really popular in the river. You've had Olympic medalists from Coleraine. Big area for golf here. There's Royal Portrush, where the British Open is sometimes held. And then there's also the Rathmore Club for scum. Graham McDowell, the golfer, comes from here, but someone told me he's not trusted here because he's got this accent that goes, "Hi, I'm Graham McDowell. I'm partly from County Antrim, if it makes me cute, but I'm also partly American, so I am." But maybe we should be sympathetic to Graham McDowell because it's confusing knowing how to speak here. I thought it was fairly easy. There was English and then some of the nationalist Irish speak Gaelic, but it turns out there's another language called Ulster Scots. And now that's an official language and forms and assembly documents have to be in all 3 languages. How many people here speak Ulster Scots? No one! What a waste of signs. This is true, right? I'm not making this up, what I'm going to say. It is the British Council issued some translations of Ulster Scots into English, and it goes, "Whit day they car ye, what is your name?" And up to me Oxters. I am very busy. My house is like a midden the new. My house is very untidy at the moment. And what's the crack with ye? Have you any news? Can you learn this on Duolingo? The wee beastie is under the table. The cat is under the table. The table is in Port Rush, like everything else. And then it says, as well as phrases, there are Ulster Scots words, such as boke, that means vomit, and minging for dirty. And universities are studying it. There's an Ulster Scots broadcast fund. So on the BBC, will they have to say, and now the weather in Ulster Scots. It's minging, so it is. Enough drizzle to make a boke. We've got some people here who speak Ulster Scots, and you may be just too shy to shout out that you do, or you haven't yet translated how to say, yes, I do. Is Abby there?
Yep. Hey.
Abby, hello. Right, I've got a couple of questions, because I'm fascinated by languages. Are there tenses in Ulster Scots? Like, do you learn, like, the future tense and the past and stuff like that?
I didn't know.
How would you say I went to Derry yesterday?
I went to Derry yesterday.
Exactly. Abby, thank you. No further questions. Nearly as dramatic as The Wild Swimming is the show that was filmed round here, which is... Game of Thrones. It must have been amazing here, and what a compliment that when a major film company wanted somewhere to make the ultimate drama about political intrigue, entrenched values, unshakable belief in tradition in an endless cycle of brutal conflict, they chose here. It means that when you watch an episode, you're going, you see where Viserion is killed by an ace spear? That's opposite where my sister lives on the road to Ballantyne. Now, I've got to be honest with you here. I'm sure Game of Thrones is brilliant. It really isn't my cup of tea. To me, it just sounds like everybody going, we must rally the mesmerons of Coriander and do battle with the anchovies under King What's-His-Name. Then arouse the mighty ferrets of Tagliatelle, but first let me give the Queen one over the ancient mirror of Tiramisu. There's a whole industry now of Game of Thrones tour guides around this area. Millions of them. More than Northern Ireland ever had workers in the shipyards. Eventually there'll be blokes from Belfast interviewed on the news going, I've been a tour guide for Game of Thrones for 35 years, man and boys, I have. You make the most of it, you do. There's a Game of Thrones hotel that looks very, very charming. The main review that the hotel puts up, I don't understand the review it's put up. It says, we cooked our own witch. The owner supplied all the ingredients and all top quality bacon, sausage, etc. I've read this message 100 times, wondering if there is anything I've missed. I think we should accept that they cook their own witch. Now, I'm amazed by this. There are groups that stage reenactments of the battles, like the people who reenact the Battle of Hastings or the English Civil War. The only difference with these groups who reenact the battles from the Game of Thrones is you can't reenact the battles because they didn't bloody happen. Was made up. Now, there is a reason, it's not just accident, why this is a Protestant area. It dates back to the 16th century when the British Crown was disturbed by the rebellious nature of some Catholic earls. And this became more urgent when the Spanish tried to invade England. And so the English knew that Ireland could be used by the Spanish to attack England. And you can see why Game of Thrones was filmed here, can't you? Already I'm thinking the next bit should go. Then Elizabeth I sent the three-eyed raven to attack the O'Neill clan, but the Bishop of Derry said, I shall wear no crown and win no glory. And the long term, I don't know why Derry's gone camp. It's so... We've had peace for so long. Of one thing you can see about Derry is it's in touch with its feminine side. I like the tricolour, but I'm just going to add a few more rainbow-type flowers. I'm LGBTQ2D or LD. The long-term solution that the English came up with for rebellious Catholics was something they called the Plantation of Ulster. Thousands of Scottish Protestants would come and live here to make Ireland more English, and the English rulers at the time didn't think there'd be much opposition to this. A writer called Morrison wrote about the Irish, when they come to market to sell a cow or a horse, they never return home until they've drunk the money they made in Spanish wine. And, which that has a great laugh, doesn't it? So the English went, to stop this fun, we're going to send hundreds of thousands of Presbyterians over hundreds of years. That's quite a commitment to being miserable, I think. And a British lord and an advisor to Elizabeth I, Sir Thomas Smith, devised a plan that after enough people had moved here, no Irishman born of Irish race and brought up Irish shall purchase land, bear office, or be chosen for any jury. By 1700, 280,000 people had moved here, most of them from Scotland. The settlers were assured that for every 10 families or 24 men planted here, they would receive 1,000 acres of land. And the Causeway Coast Guide tells us at the start of the 17th century, Coleraine became the first town in the plantation of Ulster. Colerane's pre-plantation history is turbulent. At the time, Ireland was divided into kingdoms, each governed by a chieftain. Now, that's a good point that explains why the plantations had to happen, because before then, things had been turbulent. A plan was made that an abbey and 200 houses would be built on the side of the ban, and one settler is quoted in the history books as saying, of course the abbey has been put on the east side, typical. But they went to a lot of trouble to establish the town. So it's only fair that it should be celebrated 400 years later by having all the kids in separate schools. But, of course, it's not all about conflict here. It is beautiful and peaceful if you're not here when the motorbikes are doing 200 miles an hour along the country roads. There are farms almost in the middle of the town. There's a constant air of stillness and calm. And you've got your heroes. As well as your rowers, you've got Bertie Peacock, who has a lovely statue in the precinct. He played for Northern Ireland in the 1958 World Cup. There's Harry Gregg, the goalkeeper from here, who rescued Manchester United players off the burning plane in Munich, a true hero. He didn't even stop before he dragged them out of the plane to say, by the way, which school did you go to? He just did his duty. And over the hill is Bushmills with its whisky distillery in the little town called Bushmills. I was shown round by Darren, who was so passionate, and he started the tour by asking us to look around and then tell him what are the 3 ingredients of whiskey. And I looked around and I guessed one of them must be Union Jacks. I am a snob with a whiskey. I read reviews that go, on the nose is a hint of panda fur and windoline. And instead of going, oh, for God's sake, I think, oh, yes, I can get that. And so I loved it when someone on the tour asked if you should put ice in a single malt. And all of Darren's jolly demeanour drained away. And he just managed to constrain himself and say, no. I would never put ice in whiskey. Now, if you'd all just like to come through here. I just want to say at this point, single malt whiskies are prepared with staggering expertise and dedication. They are heated with peat or turf, or in Ireland without that, but deliberately to create a more or less smoky flavour, left in barrels of precise sizes, infused with sherry or bourbon or port, and left for 10 or 16 or 24 years, and left again maybe for a final year in a different barrel. And then people put Coke or ginger poxy ale all over it. Heathens. It's like going to a Michelin-star restaurant where Rick Steins made sea bass with some elaborate sauce and go, oh, how lovely, and covering it with more teasers. That sounds all right, actually, doesn't it? At this point, I would like to introduce Ruth and Valerie.
Hello.
Hello, Ruth. So what is your job at the distillery?
I'm a tour guide.
Do you get asked that about ice and put
Oh, yeah. We ask people to leave after they ask that question.
I must ask you, I've heard, tell me this is true, I honestly don't know the answer. I've read that the staff all get a free bottle once a month.
Oh, yes.
That's true, is it?
Oh, yes. Do you want to know why?
Yes.
Well, it used to be everybody was given a little drink when they were leaving. Every night on the way home, you were given a small snifter. And then, because people were driving, they couldn't give it to them and then get them into the car. So they saved it all up and give us a bottle once a month.
Oh, right, so people only drink and drive completely paralytic. Once a month, rather than a little bit drunk every day. Can I just say hello to Valerie?
Hello, Mark.
Hi, Valerie. So you're a guide there as well, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
So tell us this is something I didn't realise this, that lots of the mixture, as we call it, that before it becomes whiskey, is given to the local cows and pigs.
That's true. That's why our bacon and beef is so wonderful.
So that must make them drunk then?
Happy.
After it's distilled, there's a bit left that's called pot ale.
Right.
We don't use it to make whiskey, but it can be fed to pigs because pigs have solid bodies and they don't mind a little bit of alcohol.
Right.
But we had a farmer in one day and he told us that he had bought the pot ale, but he didn't have any pigs, so he spread it on his fields as fertiliser because it's really, really good. It's full of yeast. And he was looking out his kitchen window and he noticed his ducks had escaped into the fields. And one by one, the ducks were falling over drunk.
I went back a second time and bought a bottle of the acacia wood one. That's quite classy, isn't it?
Yep. It's not the most expensive.
No, I doubt it is. What is the most expensive?
Well, the most expensive in the shop is the 31-year-old, which is £2,200 a bottle. But then there's another one that we recently sent to Dubai, and it's 44 years old, and it's £10,000 a bottle.
God, and wasted on someone in Dubai.
Where they don't drink.
Imagine they'll get that and then go, lovely, now where's me ginger ale? And so what mad question? You get mad questions asked?
Yeah,
about?
every day. We've been discussing this. After I had done the tour, I said at the end once, has anybody any questions? And this lady put her hand up and said, yes, is that your natural hair colour? And I said, I'm 65, what do you think?
Thank you very much to Ruth and Valerie, and thanks also to all the people at Bushmills. So you can see why Coleraine is so popular with tourists. There's such a variety of fascinating things that are not quite in Coleraine. It's astonishing out there on the coast, though, isn't it? It was so beautiful going around these places. You must love it out there. You stand by these waves that are crashing in all directions like a tidal mosh pit, and there's a pungent aroma of seaweed that makes you feel alive, and whichever way you look, there are deadly cliff edges and rope bridges, and there's mist and an outline of Scotland and the Isle of Islay and Donegal, and even if it's baking hot and cloudless, you know in a minute it's going to pour with rain, and it's vibrant and it crackles and you can enjoy it surely without having to go, that's where a made-up bloke punched a dragon. The political discussions here have mostly moved on from those days. Now one of the main issues here is immigration, and I can understand why some people here are so opposed to immigration, because if there's one thing that a Protestant community in Ireland shouldn't have to put up with, it's people coming from one country to settle in another. There's a romance here and a sense of drama, as if you sit coiled up in your cosy, contemplative Coleraine and then you burst out to a wild coast and crazy bikes and whiskey and films of warring dragons. And when you've gone to the trouble to go outside to have fun, you will enjoy yourselves when you get there. And you know the British asked you to come over here, built your town 4 miles from where you needed to be. They gave everything to east of the river. They sent a generation of your men to fight in the Somme. They pedestrianised your shopping centre. You're more fed up with Britain than anybody. You are the heart of traditional Republican Ireland. I think maybe in secret you do sing medleys of songs by the Dubliners, get blessed by the Pope and shout, "Coleraine says Chucky our lar." So I will leave you, Coleraine, with a beautiful poem written for this enigmatic town by the collection of poets from the Coleraine cluster in what I feel is a fitting testimony to you all in this lovely place, which I've enjoyed so much. Soak up the tingling, cool antrim rain. Take in the sunset that brushes Coleraine. Ponder and wonder and dream in a bar up the A2 in Portrush, not that far. Gaze at the moon on the brow of a hill that's only a few dozen miles further still. Return to Coleraine for the best view of all. 7 stories of beauty we call County Hall. Thank you all. Now, I should say, Coleraine, I am aware that after 25 years of peace in Northern Ireland, this programme may well be the thing that destroys the Good Friday.